Hi folks, this is Kieran from Payroll Heroes Client Success. Here's a short video about the 4 components of payroll. They're generally country agnostic, although may vary depending on where you are located. Most payroll admins structure their flows around the tax status of the items being credited or debited, or based on the individual line items on the payroll. These approaches do work, but they're not the most efficient. Personally, I'd recommend structuring your payroll process to have different flows around each of these 4 components. The 4 main components are gross compensation, recurring items, ad hoc items, and government deductions. Each of these have their own components, and we'll take a closer look at them now. Gross compensation is probably the easiest to understand. It's any item that makes up your employee's basic compensation package. The first item is gross pay, which is just one aspect of the overall gross compensation. However, this is usually the bulk of any employee's payroll. There's generally 3 main types of pay. Salary. Salary means that they get paid the same fixed amount each payroll, regardless of their attendance. Monthly. Monthly is very similar to salary. Monthly paid employees also get an amount each month, but it's not fixed. It will fluctuate based on their attendance. For example, they will receive less pay if they come into work late and more if they worked overtime. Hourly. Hourly paid employees are those that get paid for the exact hours they work. So if you were being paid $1 an hour and worked 100 hours, you would receive $100 as your gross pay. Other noticeable mentions here would be daily rates and piecemeal, so employees who get paid per day or per item they complete. Overtime is usually paid at a premium. The standard practice is usually to pay overtime at a certain percentage of the base pay rate, e.g. 125%. So if you were paid $10 an hour and then worked overtime, you would get $10 multiplied by 125%, which equals $12.50. Other multipliers. For other multipliers, these work in the same manner as overtime, but are applied in different scenarios. For example, it's not uncommon in most countries to pay employees more if they come into work on a public holiday. In the Philippines, the rate is 200%. So the same $10 base rate would be $20 on a regular holiday. This is also why we call them multipliers, because you multiply the scenario percentage by the base rate. One thing to note, some companies don't multiply, but actually do addition. In the UK, where there is no government mandated rate for working overnight, it's not uncommon for employers to pay an extra £1 or £2 for work done late. These would also fall into this category. The last one, and this depends on your company's process, would be leave pay. If you don't pay these out as separate line items, they will be part of the gross pay, and so therefore part of the gross compensation. This is far more common with monthly and salary paid employees than any other type. Next would be recurring items. Recurring items are those other payments that you credit or debit to employees every payroll. This might be for a preset period of time or in perpetuity. It's important to clarify that the amounts of these recurring items may vary from payment to payment. A great example of this would be the cost of living allowance in the Philippines. It's a government-mandated allowance saying that all minimum wage employees should receive 15 pesos for each day worked. So the amount paid out will always fluctuate based on the amount of days worked in the pay period. But it's always paid each pay period. Usually all allowances are recurring items. The frequency may change, either per payroll, per quarter, per month, etc. But they are consistently deducted on the same schedule. Loan payments. Loan payments are another great example and illustrate how the payment doesn't need to be deducted forever. Usually if you give an employee a loan, they pay it back over X pay periods until the original amount is repaid. Subsidized benefits. Subsidized benefits are a huge catch-all. A lot of companies give their employees benefits where they cover most of the cost, but the employee does need to contribute some portion of this. These are consistently deducted every payroll and continue until the employee either leaves or decides that they don't want to avail of the benefit any longer. This isn't an exhaustive list. The important thing to remember is these items will be credited or debited from an employee on a strict schedule, either for an ongoing period of time or in perpetuity. So that brings us to ad hoc items. Ad hoc items are those infrequent payments that you have to make. Ad hoc is actually a Latin phrase that means for this. When you are doing something on an ad hoc basis, you're doing it for that specific case and no other. Adjustments. Adjustments are a great example of an ad hoc item. Every time you do an adjustment, you are making it to fix a specific error or issue. Expenses. Expenses would also come under this category. Every expense payout is done for a particular expense or expense report. Sure, you may have employees that submit an expense report with some frequency, e.g. those employees who are allowed to claim back fuel costs. However, if that same employee ended up working at head office for a month and they didn't drive anywhere, they wouldn't receive a mileage expense. Whereas if they received a car allowance, which is a recurring item, they would still receive the amount. Breakages, spillages, etc. In some countries in the food and beverage industry, it's not uncommon to charge the server if they drop a plate or a glass. These would also be another example. Vacation and sick pay. Finally, vacation leave and sick pay would live here if you don't include them in the gross pay. Again, this list is not exhaustive. It's important to note you might and probably do make these types of payments every payroll. However, they usually won't be the same employees and for the same amounts. Don't get me wrong, sometimes an employee might break the same glass or claim the same amount of miles, so their amounts are the same, but this is because of circumstances and not because they are recurring items. Just remember, these items are infrequent and the amount always varies. They are not deducted or credited to an employee each payroll. Finally, we have government deductions. And you know what they say, there's only two things in life that are certain, death and taxes. Well, unless your employees are in countries that don't tax lower wage earners, this is definitely true. The other government deductions will vary based on your location. In the Philippines, this would be Pag-ibig, SSS, PhilHealth. Singapore have charitable deductions and CPF. The UK has national insurance. Canada has EI and CPP, etc. Most governments have their own mandated deductions that employers have the responsibility to deduct. So that's it. Gross compensation, recurring items, ad hoc items, and government deductions. If you have different types of processes for each of these four components, you'll be far more efficient when trying to generate payroll. For any questions, or if you'd like to leverage our system to optimize your payroll, please comment below or contact support@payrollhero.com. Thanks.